Hi, this is Elena of the Witch's Box, and we're here today with another episode of Witch BookTube, where we're going to be talking about a book called Moon Power, Lunar Rituals for Connecting with Your Inner Goddess by Simone Butler. There's the book cover. It's a really beautiful book cover, and last week I was called out because the book that I picked for last week, I also judged by the cover, and I was called out on that, and I loved that you did that because it was true, and it actually worked out really well. However, this cover drew me, the idea of this book drew me, and it wasn't as positive of an experience as the other books. So it's going to be one of those books. Let me really quickly read the bio for the author. Simone Butler is a moon child and has lived the lunar mysteries all her life. Her latest book, Moon Power, Lunar Rituals for Connecting with Your Inner Goddess, is now available on Amazon.com. As a professional astrologer since 1985, Simone lectures and writes on astrology and the arts. She has written extensively for The Star Scroll, The Mountain Astrologer, and Tarot.com. Her first book was Astro Feng Shui, Making Magic in Your Home and Life. Simone lives in San Diego with her 2 cats. You can sign up to receive her entertaining bi-monthly blogs at www.astroalchemy.com. This bio I got off of Goodreads. This book in format and in organization is very similar to a book that I reviewed, I want to say maybe it was a month and a half ago, which I loved. It was The 12 Faces of the Goddess by Danielle Blackwood. I loved that book. I will actually link to that book down below. It was great. It was a Jungian interpretation of the astrological archetypes for each of the signs, which is totally up my alley. It's something that I'm very deeply interested in, and she did a phenomenal job there. It was well researched, it was well referenced, the rituals were beautiful. It spoke to, for me, what is something really essential for everyone, regardless of gender, and this is something I'm going to get into in a minute. It's important for us to have the experience of orienting to the divine as feminine. All of us, I believe. This is my personal opinion. It's my personal statement that regardless of your gender identity, there is something very powerful about shifting how we relate to the divine based on gender. We have been under the umbrella, the veil, in a lot of ways, maybe sometimes the burden of orienting to the divine as masculine. And in a lot of ways, it has been very damaging for many, many people because of the way it's been done. I am skirting around politics. I'm skirting around a lot of things here, but I think that you all are a mature enough audience to understand what I'm talking about. There is something really powerful that happens when we relate to the divine, either through research, learning, worship, devotion, embodiment, which is something that I'm not going to totally get into here, but is a really important topic for witches at some point that I need to address. Regardless of your religious, spiritual upbringing, we are all, I'm going to say in the Western world, pretty familiar with this notion that humans were created in the image of God, which is a very Judeo-Christian truth, tenet, philosophy. But there is this thing in the culture that we are mirrored after, patterned after the divine, that we have a connection to the divine in that way, that we are mirrored after the divine. So to think that and then have a very particular masculine archetypal God to relate to shapes our culture, and it shapes the way we understand ourselves. It shapes the way we strive to grow or improve or to be. When you have an opportunity to identify with deities or the divine as a different gender with different characteristics, different ways of approaching things, with different values, it allows us broader room to explore not only ourselves, but to explore how we want to be in the world and to explore how we want to experience the world, ourselves, each other, connection, worship, devotion. I'm hoping I'm being clear. So I really want to say this because it's come up, and I think it's important, that I'm very oriented to the goddess. I'm a cisgendered woman. I present heteronormative. I'm married to a man, right? So I have this particular lens. And it's important to identify that, and it's important that I remember that. For me, working with the divine as a feminine construct has been incredibly empowering, has been incredibly healing, has given me the capacity for understanding more, not only of who I am in the world, but of the world in general. And this isn't about exclusivity. This isn't about anything of that sort. It's important that for me, that I was able to shift the paradigm from which I was relating to the divine. So discovering goddess worship or goddess study has been really revolutionary for me. And I did this a long time ago. I have been in this community for a very long time. I have been a self-identified witch for, I should count it, but at least 25 years. And before that, I grew up in a household where magic and ancestors and gods and goddesses were also part of our home culture. My dad he passed away a long time ago, but my dad was a santero. They're Cuban refugees. So this gives you an idea of where I'm coming from. For me, finding the goddess in the Western context, which is kind of very New Agey, was very revolutionary. Was it and has it been problematic? Yes. Okay, so understand all of that. I'm giving you guys a lot of talk, a lot of information, but I want to just set some context here. Books like this that talk about the goddesses, as a way of understanding the archetype so that you yourself can explore those characteristics of those specific archetypes in yourself, I think is really important healing work, regardless of your gender. Okay, this is important because I really think that there needs to be more books that talk about exploring these archetypes and these deities from the lens of all genders. I have not seen that book, but that is something I think that we need to start exploring more and more as we move forward. That is why the book that I read a few months ago by Danielle Blackwood, The 12 Faces of the Goddess, she addressed it to women as they identified as women, right? So however you arrive at the identity of woman, she addressed it to that. And she also had, and this has been a while since I've read it, but a blurb somewhere in the book where she addresses the fact that this is for everyone, not just women, but she was speaking specifically to women. And I think that there's need for that and there's space for that. This book doesn't quite do that. And I'm addressing a couple of things and you're going to be like, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about all this stuff? There is a whole other thread that I want to weave into this conversation, which is this. Culture is changing rapidly. We are talking about things now, particularly with how it relates to gender identity, now in 2019, that we were not talking about in 2017, right? Like the way we language things, the way we understand things is changing rapidly. And there is this knee-jerk reaction that's a trend right now to really harshly judge books that were written 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, because they're not using the same language. We were not there back then, right? We didn't have that understanding back then. And so I think it's important to remember that when you read a book that was written outside of where we are today, which by the way is going to be a very different scene in a year, the way we are languaging and the way we are understanding ourselves psychologically with regards to gender identity is just changing rapidly. It's exciting, but it's important to keep in mind that in 2017, when this book was published, we weren't quite having this conversation the way we're having it now. We certainly weren't having it 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So some of these books will read a little archaic, right? Because it's like, you're missing a lot in what you're writing, but it wasn't there when they were writing this book. With that said, this book was published in 2017. It feels archaic even to the conversation that was going on in 2017, right? Like this feels like a book that I would have read when I first came into the goddess movement and into witchcraft and into feminine spirituality like 25 years ago. And that, it bothered me. It bothered me only because I really wanted to love this book. But the minute I kind of caught onto that, I was like, oh man, this is so, I don't want to say, what did it feel like? Let me just be honest. This is not something that feels relatable or accessible or of use to me. That's what it felt like. Because it feels like just archaic language. This book is coming from a place of like 10, 15, 20 different conversations ago. Does that make sense? This book comes from a very feminine, essentialist, female essentialist perspective. I think that there are things about that might still be a little relevant for people. It's very behind the times. There are parts of it that felt incredibly sexist, And I thought, girl, come on. It's just out of date. Okay, so there's that. That was just in the first couple chapters. It's out of date. There was also the sense that it just wasn't well researched. I was just disappointed. I don't even know what to say. Oh my God. I was disappointed because I really wanted to read this book and I really wanted it to be good and I really wanted it to be relatable for me, and it wasn't. I understood it. It's language that I know very well, but it's language that I know very well from literally 25 years ago. It just doesn't seem like she's caught up with what the conversation is right now, or even what the conversation was in 2017, right? Because again, I want us to all keep in mind that what our conversation today is very different than what it was 2 years ago, and yet still, it's outdated. So there's that. It's a little sexist. There's a quote here that says something like, according to several studies, men find self-confidence to be the most attractive quality a woman can possess. They want us to be more forthcoming about our desires and speak our deepest truth. They need us to tell them what we want so they can provide it. Men love to provide. Most of all, they long for us to be the goddess to them. It's what every man seeks, and when yours finds it in you, he'll worship you forever. It's just outdated. It's outdated. It's an outdated idea of what men want, what women want, the idea that women are looking for their men. It's outdated. It's outdated. So from that perspective, she just jumps into each sign, what a woman under each of those signs would be. And this is the thing that was just disappointing about each of these chapters, is that she broke down some really great stuff that I thought, in theory, this would have been a fantastic book had it not been outdated. For each sign, she gives you what like the lunar superpower is for that sign, what your lunar shadow is for that sign, the sexual nature of that sign, the karmic path of that sign, what a Gemini, or what that sign, a moon woman would be. She breaks down the moon qualities. She'll give you a modern Gemini moon goddess reference. So in this section, she'll always talk about someone that we know and break down their personality and how that relates to being a Gemini moon. She'll then reference a goddess, and then she'll talk all about that goddess as it relates to the Gemini moon, a story, an animal that goes with that sign and that goddess, creating an altar to the goddess, a new moon ritual, a full moon ritual, and then things to do when the moon is in that sign, as well as journal questions for reflection. I mean, all of that is amazing, right? It's a great outline. I'm not saying that you're not going to get something out of this book. I'm just saying that it really could have been so much more had it been current. That's what it is. It's just not current. It's outdated. It's different than the other book that I keep referencing that I love, 12 Faces of the Goddess, because that was very heavily about the astrology and the archetype through Jungian psychology, and in depth and well researched and well referenced. It's different in that this does not cover each goddess from the reference point of an archetype. It talks about the deity itself, which is something really important for a lot of us to explore and can be really rich for our own personal development. And this isn't that book, which I wish it would have been. I'm hoping that there are other books that have done this differently. I think that there are quite a few books out there under the umbrella of spirituality, witchcraft, New Age, and all of that are older, but still kind of stand the test of time. I've covered those books. I've really very purposefully not gone into a lot of new books that have just been released now throughout this process of reviews, because there are a lot of books that are older that don't get the attention that they should be getting and that are still relevant. Those books can be very helpful for your path. I'm going to hold out for other books that do what she's trying to do here, but that are just much more updated and current in the dialogue. I wanted to love it. I really did. So this is one of those examples of when I judged it by its cover and it didn't turn out as well. I had a conversation with Elliot, who's our newest member of our team, who's amazing. He's making my life so much better and easier. I can't even begin to tell you. And I had a conversation with him. It was brief. It wasn't a big deal, but I said, I'm not really into the book and I'm really bummed. And I'm wondering, does it make sense for me to even do a review or a discussion of a book if I just don't like it? And his feedback was great. He said, it's important for some people who don't have a lot of money to spend on all these books to have an idea of which ones to steer away from or which ones not to. And that's really what kind of made me decide to do this as well, because it's never comfortable giving a book a negative review. It's not something I am enjoying. And obviously I have a lot of opinions about it, but and this is something else I want to say, because we all have our own opinion. This is just literally coming from my own personal opinion about what I like to see in a book, what I don't like to see in a book, what I think makes sense for us, what I think doesn't make sense for us, those things may not speak for you, right? So it's always important to use our critical thinking, that if you see the work that I do in the Witch's Box and the things that I write and the things that I communicate with you either through video or social media or the blog posts or personally, and you feel like you resonate with the lens from which I'm coming from, then these reviews can be helpful for you, and it's advice that you can take. Don't spend money on this book. Spend money on another book that does it differently, that does it maybe better, in my opinion. If you watch me and you're thinking like, this girl is just full of it, then that's information that you can use so that you can just buy the books that you want to buy and not even listen to me, right? So this is very similar to a book that I have wanted to write for a very long time that includes different information, but I like the setup. I'm all about, you know that I'm all about journal questions and introspection and internal inquiry. I think that that's important for a witch's life. So I love that she has journal questions, right? These are the things I liked. And I love the examples of the goddess archetype in different realms of life. Like, all these things are great, but it's just her lens is outdated. That's it. The other thing, though, that is kind of a tangent, is that when I read her bio, she brought up something that I haven't seen or heard in a long time. And again, you guys, I've been around for a while. There was a periodical called The Mountain Astrologer that I'm going to assume is still around. I had no idea. I haven't seen that in such a long time that I thought, oh my God, I need to check that out again. So there's a positive there. This is something I'm going to do a little bit of a side review, not a review, a side video on in the next couple weeks. But I give each of the books that I review here on YouTube a mini summary review on Goodreads along with a star rating. And this is a book that I would give a 2. Like a 1 for me would be like that book of like a couple months ago that I was just like, do not buy this book. And a 2 is like, I don't recommend buying it, but it wasn't atrocious. It wasn't bad. It was just, these are the reasons why I wouldn't recommend it. And I would give it a 2. But I'm going to do a video that kind of walks all of us through like how I choose my stars and what it means, so that if you ever like cruise through my Goodreads and you see a book that I've reviewed and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 stars, you'll know why or what that means. And then the other thing is, I love Goodreads. It's probably next to Instagram, my newest favorite social media platform, because it's just all about books and not a lot of noise, which is what more and more I'm finding Facebook to be just exhausting with the noise. If you see me on Goodreads, send me a wave. I think that's it for today. I've already started reading the book for next week. So far, I like it. So let's keep our fingers crossed. And I will see you on the social medias. You guys, if you find this video and you're interested in the Witch's Box, follow us on social media. All those links are down below, because a lot of conversation goes back and forth and things get said and not said there that don't get said or not said on the website or here. And so it's kind of nice to have all of you involved in different conversations, so that over time I can remember like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so from there and from there. I love it. I'm all about socializing with all of you. So something's coming soon though. I'm hinting, and I'll be hinting for the next couple months, and then there'll be a reveal. So have a wonderful week. I will see you on the social medias, hopefully. Leave comments below about your thoughts on this book or any other books. I love chatting with all of you, and I will see you hopefully in the middle of this week, but definitely next Monday we'll have another video. Have a wonderful week. Blessings.